All right. Good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LeBuff here with you. Got Dustin Dodore, Brad Vandalite with me. Okay, so tonight's episode I titled Enemy Contact. And there's a couple layers to this, but enemy contact often just refers to kind of the moment that you, I would say it this way, the moment that you become aware of a threat. Okay, so enemy contact, often military terms, is the second that you now are engaging with the enemy force. But it can just be a matter of you're out with your family, whatever it is, and all of a sudden you become aware of a threat. Remember, it might not have manifested into a physical threat at this point. This might just be the awareness of a potential threat. That is enemy contact. Okay, and I think that that's worth diving into just to explain that, because most people, I should say a lot of people, the second that they become aware of a threat, and remember, how does the human system often become aware of a threat? You see it, you hear it, or you feel it, the messenger of intuition. Okay, so sometimes all three of those faculties are going off at once, and sometimes it's a feeling. Then you look around and you become, that reinforces that feeling, right? Sometimes it's something you hear, middle of the night, and all of a sudden you hear a noise, something that is not, something that is off baseline for the sounds that your house typically makes. Maybe that's a glass shattering, maybe it's a door being pried open, maybe it's the creaking of the steps, whatever it is. But you see a threat, you hear a threat, or you feel a threat. The moment that your radar is activated, you have enemy contact, or at least the survivable value lies in assuming you have enemy contact. Okay, so what do we do with this? Okay, now I'll leave this as the final setup. We'll cut to the intro, and this will give you guys an opportunity to kind of collect some thoughts on this. But I think often the second that somebody, for the average person again, becomes aware of a threat, so they have enemy contact, their brain shoots straight to annihilation. So there's two different types of warfare. There's a war of attrition and there's a war of annihilation. I think a lot of people are primed or trained or have the perception that the second you have enemy contact, it engages the war of attrition. Okay, which means they just like, I gotta neutralize that threat. I think there's far more to it that needs to be explored. And that's what I want to dive into tonight. So I'm going to cut to the intro. We'll be back in a few seconds, and we're going to dive deep on enemy contact. Hang with us. Podcast. All right, okay, we are back. And if you're just happen to be joining us, we're talking about enemy contact. And enemy contact is the moment that you become aware of an external threat, okay, to you, your family, your safety, whatever it happens to be. Now, I said that just before we cut to the intro that I believe that for the average person, when they hear the concept of enemy contact, the second you become aware of a threat, which again you see, feel, or hear, that often activates inside of most people an annihilation mindset, right? There's a threat, this person's a threat to me, then I have to neutralize that threat. And I believe that that's a very, very limited viewpoint of what needs to happen at the moment of enemy contact. So I did my little setup. I'm just curious to get your guys' visceral kind of feedback on what your thoughts on enemy contact. Let's just start at that point. So if you guys got something, go ahead and jump it in.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you did a pretty good job of introing it. One thing that just hit me listening to you talk was, just the idea of walking around in condition yellow. You know what I mean? Just having a threat-based perception of the world.
Yep.
When you go through your day-to-day life, as we always say, there's trained and there's untrained. And I think if you have a perception that's been trained as to what, the cues or indicators, the pins, if you want, of violence, if you know what those are, then that's kind of just always running in the subconscious of your mind. And it's like when you see, hear, feel some sort of stimulus, it goes through a filter. And it's not like obviously a conscious filter. You don't literally have to go through like, oh, what is this? What did I just see, feel, think? You know what I mean? But it's happening because you're trained. So the filter's been pre-trained and it's constantly screening information, looking for threats. And if it picks up on one, it pings on one, obviously you're gonna, kick it up a level and be like, okay, I do need to actually pay a little bit more attention to this. So for me, I think that's essentially what you're talking about, is at the moment of engagement, that awareness, it's being put through a filter, and you're assessing it, analyzing it, evaluating it, and kind of going through that whole process.
Okay. All right. Brad, you want to throw something down?
Yeah, I think just initial thoughts really make me come down to just having like those blueprints, understanding understanding what they are. And I think that like maybe you said something about just people going straight to, they see a threat and they go straight to annihilation. And it's like, yeah, that's not really how things happen, right? We don't operate in a kill or be killed world, where that's never anybody's, well, I would not say never, but typically that's not your first response when you're faced with violence. And it's like, but most people, I believe, have a hard time deciphering the information that's in front of them because they're not operating off a blueprint. So they actually don't know what they're facing or the severity of what they're facing.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that. I love, actually, again, the two are very complementary. So what Dustin's talking about is the condition yellow, basically having a threat-based perception of the world, but that is trained. So you've activated the radar, you've built the radar, you've developed this filter. So when you were out living life, the alternative to that is condition white, which is what the average person walks around in. Yeah, they're not stupid. They intellectually understand that there's threats in this world, but for the most part, they haven't built the filter. They haven't built the reticular activator. They haven't done any of the work to kind of mold or shape their threat perception. So yeah, they can still see, hear, or feel an impending or potential threat, but their brain actually is in condition white, either using denial to mask that, protect them from unwanted information. So they rationalize, justify, minimize, make, flat out refuse, or, just they're doing all the denial coping mechanisms. Where condition yellow is, you're saying, okay, I have this filter built, something's come to my attention. Now I'm going to up that to the next level, and we're going to start investigating it further or taking actions. I like what you said, Brad, was complimentary to that, because that's a deeper part of the filter. Brad's talking about the bad guy blueprints. And so understanding that violent predatory criminals can be cataloged, meaning that there's two core types of predators, the posturing predators, the blitzers. There's actually a persuasion predator, a third one. But when you study criminality and you understand their blueprints, that just means like they have a playbook. It makes sense, right? If you're a violent predatory criminal and you make your money by doing home invasions, okay, maybe that's just to rob possessions, maybe that's to extort people. You don't do it once. You actually figure out a system, a playbook for how to successfully do it, how to be good at it, right? Less effort in, maximize your results, all that type of stuff. And that kind of goes with serial rapists. That goes with serial murderers. That goes with gangbangers. I mean, they just figure out a way to do these things. Okay. So that means that you can understand and study the blueprints. Okay. So those things are all excellent points and really, really good. So now let's go to this part of it. What I think, and I'll just kind of paint the picture here, and I think it'll be easier for everyone to understand and for us to talk about it. But when you take in self-defense, meaning if I open my phone and go on Instagram or YouTube or any other social media, or really any other type of media, and you look up self-defense or whatever you want to call it, reality, but it doesn't make a difference. But what you're being presented with is almost always exclusively the point of contact, meaning bad guy, good guy, and somebody is teaching good guy to annihilate, how to strike harder, how to never miss, how to end a fight in 3 seconds. Like, you know what I mean? If a guy grabs you in this hug, if a guy's got you down on the ground, if a guy's done this, how to break his arm in 3 seconds, 5 fight-ending chokes every single person needs to know. Like, if you step back from that a little bit, what you're looking at is everybody is teaching annihilation-based tactics. And now, listen, context determines content. We're only seeing a snippet of it. So maybe there's more to their strategies you back out. But what I submit to you guys, and you guys, off your opinions and what you're seeing, feel free to throw in your 2 cents. But most people are training for this moment of if and when you have enemy contact, Cobra Kai that shit. Hit first, hit hard, you know what I mean? And just keep on hitting, which as a strategy and tactic has absolute validity, but it has its place. And it is not necessarily, not even by a long shot, the first go-to thing you want to do at the moment of enemy contact. Because, I mean, and I'll give credit, Tony Blauer, who is the founder of the Spear System, talks a lot about this, but he's always like, you know, all these martial artists in self-defense are always training as if you got beamed into the middle of a violent attack situation. Like the bad guy is just there. Like all of a sudden it's like the knife is at your throat, the gun is at your head, he's got you in the headlock, you're on the ground. Like, yes, you can end up in these positions, but by far and away, there is a lot of stuff that has occurred before you get to those moments. And most times, good individuals, or good guys in these scenarios, have consented their way into those positions. And if your training teaches you, right, that the second there's enemy contact, I have to annihilate that threat, you are often consenting and you are manifesting that shit. So you become biased. You have blinders on to any other type of strategy. And I want to put forward what I think is I know it's a very powerful strategy, but a strategy that I believe very few people understand or even train, because it's simply just not, it's not the sizzle on the steak. It's not sexy. Okay, it's nowhere near as sexy. So let me just put that forward, and you guys give me your feedback based off your experiences and what you guys witness about what I'm saying and whether or not I'm hitting the mark or not, or if you can expand on that.
Well, one thing I'll just echo that you brought up, because I think it's really smart and I think a lot of people miss it, is I don't think people realize like how insulted they're being by these videos and things that are online. And you like you basically you said it's like they're basically telling people like you're so ignorant that you won't even know you're being assaulted until the knife is at your throat.
Yeah.
Like you're that dumb. It's like come on. Like I would hope even people who aren't trained like would pick up on a couple indicators, you know, prior to it getting to that point, like hopefully.
Yep.
But on the same note, as you said too, like, you know, but what's the sizzle? What sells? And it's like, if you're out there like teaching people like, oh yeah, if you see this, well, just leave. It's like, well, that's not sexy. That's not cool. That's not impressive. That doesn't feed someone's ego. It's like, yeah, I know, but it works. It's like, well, yeah, but people don't care about that. Not really. They think they do, but most people don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally agree with what, like, especially about the sizzle, because it is marketing. It's like, oh, people want to know how to defend themselves, and it's like, yeah, they also want to know what to know so they don't have to defend themselves, you know. But like, you know, one of the things that what did I write down? You know, from my experience having conversations with people is, you know, it's like, oh yeah, like kind of like what you said with Tony Blauer. It's like you didn't get beamed in here. But then on the front end, it's like, well, what did you get taught about, like, pre-conflict stuff? It's like, well, just keep your head on a swivel, dude. And I was like, okay, like, what is it? But you know, it's what does that mean? And then how do I do that? What am I looking for? And then if I do see something and I do feel it, see it, or hear it, well, then what do I do? You know, like, and like it's just so silly, because when you say, here's a self-defense program, here's the physical component to that, but just make sure you got situational awareness. Keep your head on the swivel. So if you see something, then you could deploy the physical thing, because it's all we gave you. You know what I mean? So there is a huge disconnect from that pre-physical aspect of it. And you're right, there's a lot happening in between A and B.
Yeah. I want to let me throw out kind of the real meat of this, and we can just get right into it, because And I knew that this is kind of how this would come out, right? Because if we're saying that, listen, the second you have enemy contact does not always mean that you go straight into annihilation mode, right? And now it's all about being able to strike harder, strike faster, inflict damage, neutralize, end the threat, and get the fuck out of there. That's a context that absolutely can unfold, and that's a branch of skill sets that you absolutely have to have. But enemy contact, and we've just alluded to this, there is often a tremendous amount of pre-indicators. There is often a significant amount of time prior to it hitting what we call the PNR, which is the point of no return, which means it's gone physical. So that's why I love drawing out our PNR chart, because it just shows that, listen, you can have what we call DC, disengaged conflict, at the bottom of it. So you're living your life and all of a sudden you become aware of a potential threat. Now, maybe that threat is already, like, maybe that threat is already yelling at you. Maybe that threat is already threatening you, but it's still disengaged conflict, right? In the sense that it has not become a physical altercation. Well, there can be a significant amount of time before that turns into physical. So in that moment, yes, building awareness, understanding the blueprints, being able to remove yourself from the situations, de-escalation and deterrent tactics, all of those things are great. And all of those things are, I think all of us would probably agree, probably more valuable than even your physical relaying of injury, right? That's almost like the prerequisite. Like a lifeguard should know how to swim. But swimming has very little to do with lifeguarding, right? You need to be able to identify threats and prevent people and from drowning before you have to effect a rescue. Like, you don't want to wait until they're drowning, right?
Well, imagine if a lifeguard's only training was like the CPR part of it, the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and that's it. It's like, well, just stand on the side, as Brad said, keep your head on a swivel.
Yep.
And when you see someone who's drowned, pull them out and administer mouth to mouth.
So when should we do that?
It's
when
one
you
way.
see a body at the bottom of a pool or any body of water, go get them. Like, so what you need to learn is how to retrieve a body off the bottom of out of the bottom and pull them up and then resuscitate. That's
No,
lifeguarding.
but it's more like they're at the bottom of the pool and you got to go down there and give them CPR. It's more what it's like. Honestly.
Exactly. So let me throw this out there, and I want to see how you guys respond to this. Let's now assume we have enemy contact. So we have become aware of a threat. Just for the sake of this scenario and this discussion, the threat is real. It's viable. Okay, so it has not yet gone to the place of no return. So it's not yet physical. Okay, but that is imminent. That is coming. And then we can change the scenario and we will do the same thing, and we'll do it as if now the threat is physical. But let's just start where there's conflict. We become aware of it. We have enemy contact. It is not yet physical, but definitively this is a threat and it must be dealt with. Okay. And now we can neither remove, de-escalate, or deter. So then really what's left is our only option then to annihilate. Or what happens if we actually start understanding a different strategy, the war of attrition, and I put forth the strategy of suppression? Now, suppression, you could argue, is a form of deter, de-escalate. But actually, I'm not talking about that at all. If there is something that is imminent, if this threat is happening, it is mutating to a physical level, I can start using suppression, war of attrition, versus having to go into war of annihilation. And matter of fact, what I would submit is that it's not even a this or that choice. This is not a debate between which is better, meaning people would go, this guy just wants to use suppression when, fuck that, someone's threatening my life, I'm going to annihilate that motherfucker. I'm actually talking about necessity. Everyone that says that, what happens when they're bigger than you and they're stronger than you and they're better equipped than you and they outnumber you? Remember, most people aren't even fully aware of the 5 ingredients that every single violent predatory criminal wants to bring to every single attack situation or altercation that they have. They want to overwhelm, overpower, out-equip, out-position, and when possible, outnumber. Those 5 ingredients, they want to max those out at 100%. So they want to bring a 500% advantage into every single altercation. So all of a sudden, War of Annihilation becomes a much, much, much greater challenge than what most people think. Okay?
Because, you know, like, also just to add in is, like, we say this all the time. It's like they also dictate the time,
Yeah.
the place, the location, the duration, the intensity, all these things that they're dictating. And it's like, what survival value is it to just be like, well, no, fuck you, I'm bigger, stronger, better, faster, more skilled, ready for this, prime for this, like all these things happening on that level. And it's like, well, you're consenting again, like that, like when you're setting up the kind of scenario, I'm like, that's consent. If you think you're going to go in there and annihilate, to me, you just consented to that.
Well, it's kind of like the casino has a 500% advantage in a game, and you sit there and put dollar after dollar into this. You know what I mean? It's like it's very difficult to overcome a 500% advantage. Now, at the end of the day, you might lose a bunch of money, but in violence, you're going to lose your life, and it's going to happen quick. You don't necessarily get to play a second hand. You know, it's high stakes poker. So,
Greg, can I say something
Yeah.
to that? I don't know if I think you watched that documentary. Remember the guy that took all that money from the casinos?
Mhm.
And what he did is he changed the terms.
Yeah.
Right? He negotiated. He's like, I'll come to your casino. I'll do this. I'll play the terms. And it popped in my head because it's like, well, don't play his game.
Yeah.
Play your own game, because don't consent, because the house is stacked in their favor. So if you're not changing the game, if you're not changing the terms of how that interaction is going to happen, like you're walking into like
Yeah, well,
stacked deck.
isn't that the value of understanding what those 5 ingredients are in the first place, and how that's part of what? Let's jump back to what you said about the blueprints. That's the value of understanding the bad guys' blueprints, is that you understand where they have the advantages, how they're trying to bring a 500% advantage on top of you, and how else can you control follows awareness. If you're not aware of how and what they're doing, then you're gonna have a much harder time trying to counter those effects. But so let me define suppression for a second, just for, again, clarity of everybody that's listening or watching this, right? So obviously, suppression fire in military terms is often a sustained volume of fire, not necessarily designed to hit the enemy combatants, but to keep them covered, like to keep them down, to suppress their ability to return at least accurate fire, okay, as well as to impact or affect their ability to maneuver. So suppression fire on a battlefield has tremendous tactical advantages. If a team needs to move individuals, they can lay down a volume of suppression fire, which makes it much safer for them to now reposition and try to outposition the enemy, flank them, whatever it is, to develop different positions of dominance, to cover reloads, to do all kinds of different things. So most times, though, suppression strategies and tactics are never taught in quote unquote self-defense strategies. But we did a podcast a long time ago where we talked about the concept of, what if one-on-one never existed? Like, what if the concept of being, like, any time that you ever fought anybody, defended against attackers, whatever it is, it was always 2-on-1 or 3-on-1. Just like 2-on-2 didn't exist, 1-on-1 didn't exist, just it was always you were outmanned and outgunned. Okay? Then suppression strategies and tactics would come to the forefront. Yes, you would still use annihilation, because there is a moment in time where you want to relay injury. You have to terminate and end or neutralize threats. If it comes to that, if they don't disengage and voluntarily withdraw, then you may have to end that threat. But you would see a much better balance, and you would understand suppression. Because let's just tweak the scenario a little bit. Now I become enemy contact is established. And it's established, not only do I have pre-indicators, so I see it developing, I see it coming, but I do not have enough time, or because of other factors like having my family with me or different, more vulnerable individuals, I don't have the time to remove myself. Clearly, there is no de-escalating or deterring. So now the physical assault is on. If I have two guys swarming me, right, which is what they want to do, they want to blitz, blitzers blitz, ambush, overwhelm, destroy. Okay, they want to swarm you. Clearly, they're going to be looking to outposition you, right? The two guys aren't going to line up and take a ticket and fight you one at a time. They're going to fan out. They're going to surround you. They're going to swarm you. If this happens, having the ability to give space, something that is called a fighting retreat, which is not to be confused with a surrender retreat, okay, or a survival retreat, a fighting retreat allows you to give space, okay, which actually draws the swarm attack in. It causes them to increase pressure and speed. Anytime an enemy force increases pressure and speed, it always comes at the cost of reduced safety. That's just the reality of it. Now, if individuals use pressure and speed and catch the person by surprise, that pressure and speed can annihilate people, right? It's very, very powerful. Speed, surprise, and violence of action. Those are the three tenets of most special forces and combat training, and we use those religiously. What I'm getting at, though, is when you're well trained, you greatly reduce their ability for surprise, right? Because you have the pre-contact awareness. Not only that, but even when they do attack, even if there is a startle flinch, even if there is an element of surprise, your brain can respond and process so quickly because you've rationalized and accepted and you trained stimulus response. So all of a sudden now you start giving space, you start executing what's called a fighting retreat, right? Which is to survive the blitz, fracture the line, establish the toe, the strategy and three tactics. But as you're doing that, you have to have the ability to suppress. So if I ask most people, there's three types of tools: natural, designed, and expedient. Natural tools on the body. Do you know how to suppress with the natural tools on the body against multiple opponents? How do we suppress? We don't have to actually hit them, but we have to sustain a volume of fire in a manner while executing a fighting retreat that causes them to tuck and cover, causes them to hesitate, causes them to break pressure and speed. Okay, while fracturing the line, while outflanking and outpositioning. Okay, so if you can do that naturally, how do you do that? Most people would not be able to answer that. Most people, even if somebody had told them something or a concept, they spend very little, if any, time training it. The second thing is, if you go, well, natural tools, how fucking hard would that be? 2-3 guys coming at you. Well, that's why we go to design tools. Now, you may carry a knife, you may carry a tack light, you may have a tactical pen for lots of different reasons. Those are very, very useful tools in this world for many different things. But now all of a sudden a designed tool comes into play. Do you know how to suppress with that? So let's be real clear. Do you know how to suppress with a knife? Most people, even people that train with a knife, understand how to cut a knife. They understand how to cut with a knife. They understand how to annihilate with a knife. Few people understand how to suppress with the knife. Because to do it effectively, that tool has to be integrated with the tactics and the strategy. It's not just a matter of stab or slash. That's not how you suppress. It's an integrated application. So, and then of course, if the natural tools were insufficient, if you didn't have access to a design tool, but there's an expedient tool. Many, many different expedient tools. Hats to shirts to it could be a bottle, it could be chairs, it could be all kinds of different things. But do you know how to suppress with that tool? So most people would not know how to suppress. And even if they knew it or understood it to a degree, they have almost negligible hours into the training of suppression. And this will be my last point, and you guys throw your opinions on top of this. I think, personally, the best combination is your suppression fire, your ability to understand and utilize suppression leads to far more devastating annihilation. because when you have an individual suppressed, you are disrupting their base and balance. You are interrupting their programming. You are fracturing not just the physical angles of attack, you are fracturing their expectations of how they thought this assault was going to go. And this leaves people extremely vulnerable. And when they are off base, off balance, interrupted psychologically, emotionally disrupted, when you then switch and create opportunities to annihilate, the damage is far more devastating. It ultimately tends to require less effort, more damage, and get the fuck out of there. Like it brings about a much more expedient resolution to these types of situations. So pick that apart. Add to that what you will.
Yeah, the one thing that pops in my head is, just what is familiar, like I don't think, like, even just having this conversation, I think that in the realm of self-defense, we'll say, that is a strategy, that's a tactic to use. But I don't think people, for one, they don't really talk about it. They don't really know what that looks like. They don't understand. It's not like a common thing to approach, right? Everybody's like, okay, well, if you're doing self-defense, it's like, again, it's that annihilation. So it's like it's the reference point, even from on the attacker side, is very uncommon, right? Because most times what they're probably experiencing is either fighting or submitting, right? Typically probably more chances of submitting than actually fighting, but like, so I think it's one of those things in terms of like, a strategy to employ is like, yeah, it's very powerful because it's not on the radar. And why, like, one thing that again popped in my head was taking on risk. This is hard as it when you're fighting for your life against violent criminal assault, it is hard enough as it is. Why the fuck would you make it harder?
Yep. 100%. Dustin.
Yeah, for me, in a way, like one way I think about like just the suppression, using suppression to your advantage, like no different than you said, like with the military or it could be police, whatever it is. There's that whole concept of like laying down cover fire, as you said. It's a form of suppression. And everybody's heard it, movies and stuff like cover me, position, all that stuff. They're trying to overwhelm me, and I'm trying to move and I'm trying to survive that. Is like if someone told me like, well, can I get like a lifeline, like to phone a friend, but it's cover me, but understanding that you can do that for yourself. I would love to have someone else there that could lay down cover fire to help me execute my game plan. But it's like with suppression, you can provide cover for yourself. And as you said, it's like that's what gives you the ability to take a war of attrition and then eventually turn that into a war of annihilation when the time is right, when all the ingredients are there, sure. But so for me, yeah, it's like suppression is just, it's like, it's the cover me, but for yourself.
Yeah. I wish, I just had this thought now, and I wish I would have had this queued up already. I'd have to go into the archives. It would take me a little too much time here while we're live. But one of the greatest videos that I've seen recently, and it's a few years old now, but is the gentleman at the gas station filling his car with gas when the white van pulls up, door opens up, and three guys who I believe were armed jump out. One goes to go around the car this way, one goes around the front, and the guy just very, very calmly, as a matter of fact, takes the gas nozzle out of the tank and just starts spraying him in the face and just literally suppresses them back into the van, and they are now making a hasty retreat as they are just drinking liters of gasoline splashed everywhere with them, right? So this was not an annihilation tactic. But this video really speaks to what I'm talking about, because the way he used the gas to suppress them, and yes, he got a direct hit. So you can say, well, suppression is not about hitting the enemy. Well, it's not necessarily the intention of it, is it? But this is directly in line with a war of attrition versus a war of annihilation. When they got out and went running at him, instinctively or not, or well trained, when he pulled it out and sprayed him in the face, he wasn't trying to kill them. He wasn't trying to annihilate them. He was trying to suppress what was coming, right? So he just pulled it out and he sprayed it. Now, what I talked about earlier about how suppression, I think, sets up annihilation to a much higher degree. If the need would have been there, and this guy was really well trained, and that gas come out and he's spraying his face, he would have in his pocket. Every time I fill up gas, I have a road flare in my pocket. And so he pulls oh, look, these fuckers are here. Pulls the nozzle out, sprays them in the face. With the other hand, cracks the road flare. You get what I mean? And now it's like as they're suppressing and jumping back in the van, he lobs the road flare into the van, and you got a fucking inferno going up as they're driving away. Now, wouldn't have been justified because they're now leaving. The threat is dissipated, so you don't need the annihilation. But it's just, to me, it's layering of like suppression leads to annihilation. But you're not fighting a war of attrition, a war of annihilation. You're fighting a war of attrition. It just happens that at a certain point when you are using the war of attrition, there will be points and times when you have the opportunity to annihilate. And so suppression is very powerful. That guy without that gas would have, I'm sure outside of that, I don't know, but would he have had the abilities to suppress? You can use a knife, you can use natural tools, you can use expedient weapons to work very much like that gas did. Maybe it wouldn't be as quick, or maybe it'd be quicker. The point is, if you don't understand the strategy or the tactics, and you don't ever look at tools and go, how do I use these tools in a suppressive manner? We've seen people in violent confrontations and stuff use fire extinguishers as a great tool for suppression. I mean, that just makes sense, right? I often talk about home invasion, and I mean, I think one of the greatest things is, now the way my house is, this would work very, very effectively. But you think somebody's in your house, pop 3-4 smoke grenades over the balcony, like drop those down the stairs. Like, it's a great suppressive tool because it's suppressing their ability to see. This is not just me trying to deter them. If that deters them and they leave, excellent. But what happens is it is suppressing their capability to annihilate me. Do you get that that's what suppression means? When you lay down a volume of sustained fire at an enemy combatant to keep him down or to prevent him from maneuvering, you are weakening his ability to annihilate you. Because what do bad people want to do? They want to annihilate you. So don't let them just freely shoot at you. Don't let them take the time to aim and shoot at you. Don't let them outmaneuver you. Like, suppression is absolutely important. If you just got two guys standing there straight up trying to shoot and kill each other with every fucking bullet, you know what I mean? Like, you are fixated in often on a singular thing. And in a battle where you've got multiple combatants, from all angles, you don't always have the time to just sit there and go, well, listen, me and you are going to have a 3-minute rolling gunfight where we're just trying to annihilate each other. Oftentimes, and that does happen, oftentimes, you need to have a higher level of thinking involved. And again, especially imagine if it's 3 bad guys and 1 police officer, and now you're engaged in a shootout. You got to think about, conserving ammunition. You can't just, for the most part, just jump into a sustained firefight, a direct head-to-head annihilation firefight with 3 superior armed men who maybe have more rounds, who are now moving to outflank. You have to be strategic in a lot of those situations, right? If an opportunity presents itself to take the shot and annihilate, great. But if it doesn't, suppression fire can, work. I mean, look at Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman in a lot of his work on Killing on Combat, a lot of different stuff. But just talking about how one armed man with just a decent level of training can hold off a significant number of bad guys, at least to the point that reinforcements can show up. So again, what are we talking about? You don't need to end everybody. If you're a security guard at a school, let's say, and you happen to you're an armed security guard, not that we have those in Canada, but if you were an armed security guard at a school, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 bad guys burst into that school, at times, you can suppress or hold them off from achieving the type of footing or the type of momentum that they were expecting long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Whereas if you just tried to rush in and annihilate 3, 4, 5 guys, if you could go down, you have the potential there's higher risk. And if you go down in the first few seconds, they just now that just gives them more momentum. So I mean, this idea of enemy contact and how I'm introducing the concept of suppression and stuff like that, we could have very easily just done a whole podcast on momentum, on initiative, and how important it is to interrupt momentum. When people start executing any type of assault, any type of a home invasion, road rage, different things, there's a momentum to these situations. That's why people talk often about how you don't want to escalate a situation. But more than just, everyone understands escalating, the guys, I'm so mad, then all of a sudden now I'm real mad, now all of a sudden I'm like ready to kill mad. But escalation also comes with momentum often. I mean, when a human being has a small victory, we are incentivized to go for the next victory and then go for the next victory. If you can put, even if they're small failures, roadblocks, obstacles, obstructions, in the path of somebody who's trying to execute some sort of nefarious deed, that is a massive deterrent. Human beings, remember, we're not wired to accept failure that well. Right? And so the second that, remember, it's like, again, 19 positive things have to be said to somebody to counteract one negative thing. So when people start trying to do something, they have the expectation, I'm going to fucking get this guy. And all of a sudden, something doesn't go well, even if it's a small thing, like suppression. All of a sudden, they're tucking and like, what the fuck? All of a sudden, they can't maneuver the way they thought. They can't get their forward pressure established. They can't make contact right off the bat. These seemingly little things that you can cause through the use of suppression strategies, tactics, and tools, those things have big psychological, emotional impacts, not to mention tactical impacts on that situation. So again, I just think it's just a deeper level of study than most self-defense programs ever even go into. And again, I just keep defaulting back to the main reason is because the world is operating off the paradigm, the widely accepted paradigm, that defending yourself is fighting and fighting is defending yourself. It's just, so all of that is what we call kill box combat. The kicking, punching, close quarter, and ground ranges, that's the kill box. And men are taught to enter into the kill box, consent to being in the kill box, and now it's punching, kicking. That's why how to strike harder, how to strike faster, how to do, you know what I mean? It's always how to end the fight in 3 seconds, how to this, how to that. When really it's like you're just continually programming people that you need to be bigger, stronger, faster, smarter, you know what I mean? Hit harder. And again, as a guy that's now 53, and you look at when you're 23 to 53, and I mean, I do this for a living, so I mean, but there's a difference between 53 and 23 and 33 and 43, and there'll be a difference at 63 and 73. Like, at what point do you just go, I have a slight problem? No matter what technique you show me and how much you tell me to turn my hip over and keep my elbow tucked and all this type of shit, I won't hit harder. This is just what happens as you get older. So again, most self-defense programs, I would love to have a label and just put a label on self-defense training and go best before the age of 30, best before the age of 45, best before X, Y, and Z. Do you know what I mean? Because there's lots of things that are really, really good, but they're kind of, they can't adapt with you. Whereas, again, when you are truly training to utilize the tool of violence, and you can start it at 20 years old. The strategies and tactics, the strategies are the same, right? But the tactics and tools a 20-year-old use can be different than a 60-year-old. But it adapts to the individual. That's how you can have a 28-year-old kid who's in just amazing shape, but unfortunately he was in a severe motorcycle accident and he's missing a leg and he has permanent hip damage. So not only does he have a prosthetic, but he has a limited hip mobility. So that guy's going to be a shitty kickboxer. That guy's going to have a tough time holding guard. Do you know what I mean? So relatively, if he looks around and goes, well, unfortunately, I mean, I can swing some punches and try, but what can I do? Well, it has to adapt to you. The tool of violence is about destruction. A one-legged, one-armed, one-eyed guy, if you still got air in his lungs, can do a whole fuck of a lot of damage. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of whether or not he has a system that adapts to him and shows him, you know, outside thinking, right? Which really in our world, it's not out of the box thinking. It's just normal thinking, but it's asymmetrical or unconventional to the rest of the world because the rest of the world is fighting in the kill box. So, and I don't want to get onto that. I don't know how I went on that tangent. You guys should have interrupted me. Which,
I was caught up in it.
yeah, yeah. We're
was
down a
mesmerizing.
rabbit hole. Anyways, listen. Short of being able to actually go into like how we're doing it and the techniques we're using, because for most people listening to this, if you haven't been trained in the tools and the strategies we use, it's because you're not using jabs and crosses and teep kicks and all these other things. So it's tough, you know, without the training, it's tough to go into the particulars of how we suppress with a knife or how we use our natural tools to suppress and how that interconnects with a fighting retreat and stuff. But the concept you need to walk away with is that when outgunned and outmanned, you're going to need to learn how to suppress. It's to your advantage to learn how to suppress. Yes, you need to learn how to relay injury, we call it avalanching, how to bury somebody in an uninterrupted barrage and avalanche of injury. But oftentimes, falsehood precedes reality. You must understand how to flashbang, how to put people in the gap, how to use suppression strategies and tactics. There are all of these things that the bad guy wants, that 500% tactical advantage. Overwhelm, overpower, outnumber, outposition, and out-equip. He wants to maximize those 5 ingredients. We want to circumvent all 5 of those ingredients to the highest degree possible. Suppression is a very powerful way to greatly reduce the majority, if not all, of those ingredients significantly. Can be done natural, designed, or expedient. Can be done with any of those tools, weapons. Okay, so I don't know. Anything else that you guys want to put down on this topic?
Just one thing in my head that, as we were talking, you know, it's a reframe of a mentality. Because I think most people listening, when you were painting the picture of like military men, women using suppression as a tactic to, you know, either maneuver or just, you know, suppress them from them being able to annihilate, I think a lot of people are like, yeah, like, I understand that makes sense. But then when it comes to self-defense or defending themselves, it's like, well, what happens when you're facing bigger, stronger, more? It's like they used something in the military that you were like, that made sense because it had like a smaller, let's say smaller, weaker force of people were able to still move, still like suppress and maybe, you know, take a tactical advantage from that situation. But then when it comes down to themselves, it's like, oh no, I'll just stand there and fucking like, no, like there's so many examples of why that is, you know, like fighting in the kill box, and that's consenting. Like that is not the way to defend yourself. But you know, it's taking these things, reframing that mentality because it's like, yeah, like you want to defend yourself, then why don't you use the best things that you can to limit your risk, better your chances, and not consent to like violent assault. You know, and that the suppression is one of them, and there's millions of cases of that application concept being used like all the time, you know. So
yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do, a lot of the strategy and tactics have military application. Like that's where it comes from. Like, I don't know, so many technological advances, medicine, all this type of stuff have come from war, right? You know what I mean? That's where these innovations have come from. War fighters, you know, they understand, you know, they think of it differently. I just think of you know, if you were told, even if let's say it was the 3 of us and you had a site, so a building, I think of like what happened even in Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu. And we had the opportunity to get to know Danny McKnight, who led the Humvee column there and stuff, and listen to him speak and stuff. And, you know, but you have, when the Black Hawk goes down and you got, Gordon and Sugart, the two Delta operators that fast rope into that site. And there's literally, I mean, thousands of Somalis swarming that crash site. And you have, Durant, the injured pilot, who has his weapon, who's injured. And then you have the two Delta operators. And they were able to suppress, I mean, literally thousands of swarming income enemy fighters. They were able to suppress and kind of, in a way, secure that crash site for a significant amount of time until, unfortunately, they literally just ran out of ammunition before any type of reinforcements could arrive. And it's these interesting concepts of, like, if you're faced with a life and death situation like that, you lose to a degree the desire to, like, I gotta kill that guy, I gotta take that guy out, and you start in fact you are neutralizing a lot of people. But the bigger overall mission is to suppress and survive long enough for some form of reinforcement to arrive. And sometimes you can do it until they do, and sometimes you can't. But just when faced with this overwhelming force, the skill sets, the tactics, the strategies, the marksmanship, the bravery, the courage, the mental fortitude to be able to literally suppress and secure, even when taking damage, to continue to stay in the fight and suppress and be a deterrent and keep them back, literally until you've just simply run out of ammunition, is a remarkable bravery, courage, and just strategic and tactical example. Like, it's just unbelievable. And then yet we come back to, like you're alluding to, Brad, like just kind of this weird civilian paradigm that just, when somebody is a threat to me and my family, fuck you, I step willingly into the kill box, and it's just like, I'm gonna fuck you up, I gotta end you. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're biased to being like, again, what if there's two or three of them? Like, you can suppress, you can sustain, you can do all these things, and in that there will be opportunities where potentially you can neutralize if you need to, up until the point that maybe either A, reinforcements arrive, or B, they willingly disperse because they have, again, the suppression causes that failure. They're running into obstacles. You fracture their like, just so many different things. Like, so, anyways, I think it's such an interesting change in perception to challenge people with, to see when and where you find a fitting place for tactical suppression, strategic suppression, and then go, do I know how to do that? First off, because you won't ever look into, do I know how to do that? You'll never want to acquire a skill set that you just simply don't see the place or value for. So that becomes the thing. You have to own the problem, right? So
I think
I don't know. Yeah, Dustin,
that's
go ahead.
there's just something I'm thinking about as I've been sitting here the last kind of 10, 15 minutes, and I'm like, just on that exact note, it's like, how come when it comes to self-defense, people aren't more willing to accept that they need that? Like, the majority of people who've sought out self-defense to protect themselves have basically, kind of admitted that, like, yeah, I'm willing to believe that I just need to be better. I need to be stronger and better than the other guy.
Yeah.
Why do people have that mindset so willingly in self-defense when I know they wouldn't have that in any other, let's say, sport?
Yeah.
Like, give me you two and four other guys, and I'm going to try to convince you that you're going to be able to even beat a local volleyball team. Like, you'd be like, not a chance. How are we going to do that?
Yeah.
Like, not for a second would you believe it. Or the local basketball team.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, no, we're all 5'2". Like, how are we going to, like, it's so easy for people, I think, to dismiss that capability.
Yeah.
And yet when it comes to, like, the most important thing physically you might ever do, try to save your own life, and yet you're willing to believe that, like, well, I just got to be better.
Yeah.
I just got to
think
go
that's where
harder.
I
And
am.
it's like, well, that doesn't match up. Like, you know what I mean? You're being totally logical in every other situation, but when it comes to self-defense, like, you're not willing to admit that you're probably going to be weaker, not as good. Like, it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling to me that we even have to try to
Yeah.
enlighten people to how important something like suppression is. But,
Yeah.
we do, and
100%.
that's why we're here.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's it. I mean, most people, if they go anywhere for training, they go, oh, I did a course, I trained for you. Like, they taught me to punch, they taught me to kick. Now I know how to punch, now I know how to kick. And you just don't recognize how incompetent.
Yeah.
Those tools are really almost virtually useless unless you have spent the thousands and thousands of hours sharpening those tools, and even then, they are so easily overcome by violence.
Yeah.
They're just so easily overcome by evil thinking, violent individuals. It's just the thousands and thousands of hours invested in, and then just this little thing goes tink, and the whole thing just collapses. It's shocking.
Well, it's, you know what, it's your analogy of the, you know, who is it which famous guy carved like all the famous statues and shit. And you talk about like
Michelangelo's statue
yeah,
of David. Yeah.
yeah, statue of David, and it's like how much time, effort, you know, capability went into creating that,
Yeah.
and yet anybody within seconds can completely destroy it.
A 10-year-old,
And that's what you just said. Yeah,
fucking
like,
destroy it. Yeah,
right? And that's what violence is.
Yeah, creating is hard. Destruction is easy. When you learn how to legally use the tool of violence, you're learning how to legally and morally, when you need, destroy something. It's not hard. I mean, listen. 8-year-old kids with firecrackers have been have been learning how to destroy things for many, many, many years. You know, it's like it's just the natural. Like, hey, what could we do with these? You know what I mean? And you just hope there's not a cat around. So, all right. Well, we'll wrap this up here. Yeah, I think it was a great one, guys. I appreciate, as always, your time, your energy, your input. I'm trying to think if there was something else, but I think the only other thing I can add to this is anyone that's listening to the podcast, again, I always appreciate you guys, but not only do we have our live training program that we do private training through the Weaponize 16, but in the next couple weeks, I'll be launching our online version of the program, so that we're just getting so much more interest in it from people that are just out of town, out of the city, like obviously out of the city, out of the province, out of the country, and just wanting access to this type of training, this type of knowledge, this type of awareness. So I'm hard at work at putting together a very detailed online program so that people can just do this from the comfort of their own home, work through the lessons. That will be supplemented with some live coaching so that I can make sure people are on the right track, answer questions, and just kind of be able to guide their progress as they work through this. So it's something to look forward to. I'll have more details in the weeks to come, but it will be ready to go shortly. So that's an exciting new development here this year. So, all right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Dustin. Appreciate you guys. Everyone else, appreciate you. Stay safe. Stay weaponized. Chat again soon, everybody.